headed up by a man whose preferred pronouns are freedom and liberty. This is the Daniel Natal Show. This election is exposing the seedy underbelly of our political system. If anything, it's good for disclosing how much corruption we've hitherto been living with well before the period of President Trump. In our last episode, we found out about National Security Action Memorandum 57, which was created by President Kennedy to cut the CIA out of power and to transfer their special ops capabilities to the Department of Defense, which is directly under presidential control. This order, NSAM 57, sidelines the CIA and limits them to being paper pushers. As we found out, NSAM 57 was never implemented due to Kennedy's assassination. Even though it was still on the books, presidents for decades were afraid to invoke it. They didn't dare lift a hand toward the CIA. After almost 60 years, Trump just triggered it. The fallout has been monumental, with Director of CIA Gina Haspel iced out of intelligence meetings. The war between the Department of Defense and the CIA may have just intensified if one sets any store by the testimony of Lieutenant General Thomas McInerney, who said, according to his sources, a server farm in Frankfurt, Germany was seized by the Department of Defense that was being run by the CIA, and this all had to do with the rigging of the election.
The U.S. Army, the U.S. Special Forces Command seized a server farm in Frankfurt, Germany, because they were sending this data from those 5 states or 6 states through the internet to Spain and then into Frankfurt, Germany. Special Operation Forces seized that facility. So they have those servers. And they know all this data they are providing.
Did that go down without incident, by the way? Did that seizure go down without incident?
Well, I've heard it didn't go down without incident. I haven't been able to verify it. I want to be careful in that. It's just coming out. But I understand my initial report is that there were U.S. soldiers killed in that operation. Now, that was a CIA operation. And so that's the very worrisome thing.
So, did the CIA have anything to do with the, let's just say, election irregularities that have statisticians scratching their heads? More importantly, is a sort of bureaucratic civil war taking place behind the scenes between the Department of Defense and the CIA? Remember, NSAM 57 gives the CIA's powers to the DoD. If the two were really duking it out in Frankfurt, Germany, that could signal huge things happening behind the scenes. The suggestion would be that the CIA, practiced at rigging elections all over the world for more than half a century, has decided to try their hand at doing it in the United States, and that there are patriot forces now pushing back. While waiting for additional confirmation other than Lieutenant General McInerney for this internal power struggle, it is suggestive that the president just appointed 2 loyalists, Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie, to positions on the Defense Business Board. According to one article, quote, "The role of the Defense Business Board, which was established in 2002, is to provide the Secretary of Defense and Deputy Secretary of Defense with independent advice and recommendations on overall Defense Department management." So Trump is placing loyalists in key positions in the DoD hierarchy, while at the same time freezing out the CIA. We keep hearing accounts, too, of Chinese interference in the election. But here's the thing. The CIA may be using China as a platform, a base of operations. Though many people aren't aware of this, the CIA actually has its roots in China. To understand this, it might bear going back in history a bit. This history lesson begins with the 1700s, when England was making a fortune selling tea. To buy it required sending gold to India. This caused the treasury in England to become depleted. This created what's known in economics as a balance of trade problem. So much gold was flowing out of England to India that they didn't have enough on hand back home in England to do transactions. They desperately needed to replenish the coffers. So what to do? They eventually hit on the idea of selling drugs to China to replenish the gold that was flowing out to India. Thus began the famous British drug trade in China that funded the Bank of England. Of course, the Chinese resisted this. They didn't like the opium dens and dying addicts, so they outlawed opium. But the English defeated them in a series of wars and imposed the humiliating Treaty of Nanking in 1842. From their bases in Shanghai and Hong Kong, the British would continue to sell smack in China. Both Senator John Kerry's family and the Roosevelts made their money in the opium trade in China. Burton Folsom Jr. writes about how FDR's grandfather, Warren Delano, had financial losses in America and went to China to rebuild his finances selling opium. We find written in Folsom's book, quote, On his mother's side, his grandfather, Warren Delano, made his money selling opium illegally to Chinese addicts. Quote, "I don't pretend to justify the opium trade in a moral and philanthropic point of view," Delano said, but he persisted in it even when China declared a war to stop it. When Delano finally retired to his mansion in New York, his legitimate business investments there seemed to have done no better than James Roosevelt's. Strapped for cash, Delano went back to the opium trade, and Sarah spent several of her youthful years in China as her father rebuilt his finances. Reading a totally different book on the founder of the military-industrial complex, Vannevar Bush, we find a reference to another Roosevelt. Quote, "I knew that you couldn't get anything done unless you organized under the wing of the president," wrote Bush. In May 1940, Bush asked Frederick Delano, Roosevelt's uncle, to arrange an appointment with the White House. Of Frederick Delano, it adds, "Delano kept diverse company. He mixed with scientists, architects, and businessmen while finding time to investigate the opium trade in Persia and Mayan ruins in the Yucatan Peninsula." The opium trade in Persia? So like his father, Warren, Frederick was investigating drug corridors. I do like, though, how the author, G. Pascal Zachary, makes it sound like an intellectual pursuit. But basically, all these people who are presented to us as respectable are the equivalent of Colombian drug kingpin Pablo Escobar. I was reading yet another book about 19th century financier Jay Gould, and it mentioned John Murray Forbes, the great-grandfather of Democrat John Forbes Carey. In a biography on him, we read, quote, "Major financial losses during the Panic of 1837 caused him to sail for China once again, where he played a prominent role in the Opium Wars." Of course, everybody knows that the British banking system as we know it today was built on the proceeds of the drug war in China, and HSBC Bank is no exception. Their initials stand for the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank. By the way, they were busted for laundering money for drug cartels not too long ago, and HSBC also appears to be the owner of Dominion voting software that is at the heart of the current disputed election. By the way, FBI hatchet man James Comey, after letting HSBC walk on its money laundering charges, was later appointed to sit on its board of directors. So it gets interesting that when researching the origin of the CIA, it too, like HSBC, was founded in Shanghai. The CIA started out as a sprout rooted in the insurance giant AIG, which was founded by Cornelius Vanderstar in Shanghai, right at the hub of the opium corridor in China. Vanderstar would later run the OSS during World War II and created the CIA. The LA Times had an interesting article on how AIG morphed into the CIA with their article, Secret Insurance Agents. On Vanderstar's Wikipedia page, they quote from the article, quote, "They knew which factories to burn, which bridges to blow up, which cargo ships could be sunk in good conscience. They had pothole counts for roads used for invasion and head counts for city blocks marked for incineration. They weren't just secret agents. They were secret insurance agents. These undercover underwriters gave their World War II spy masters access to a global industry that both bankrolled and ultimately helped bring down Adolf Hitler's Third Reich." Newly declassified U.S. intelligence files tell the remarkable story of the ultra-secret Insurance Intelligence Unit, a component of the Office of Strategic Services, a forerunner of the CIA, and its elite counterintelligence branch, X2. Long story short, whenever you read China, think CIA drug front. Whenever you see the FBI's James Comey on the board of directors of HSBC, know what that means. China, for lack of a better word, is a sort of shell company, a front. China's interference in our election is really a roundabout way of saying the CIA is running operations out of Shanghai. Note how everywhere there's a central bank, there's an intelligence agency to enforce their will. They're its secret police. It's Gestapo. It's no coincidence that the London central banking system and the CIA both got their start in Shanghai. The CIA does not serve our interests. It serves their interests. Remember when the CIA overthrew Iran in 1953 to help British Petroleum? Ask yourself why an American intelligence agency was doing the bidding of a British corporation. Answer: the CIA is the secret police of the British banks. It is not American. It was never American. It was installed in the United States to ensure that the policies of the global central bankers were carried out, and Donald J. Trump's push to place America first doesn't exactly coincide with their interests. People fear any political leader who has his finger on the red button. What political leaders fear is people having their finger on the red button, the subscribe button. Push it and see their narratives explode. Also consider donating to help keep these videos coming. And don't forget our website and newsletter, thenewamerican.com.